Welcome to the Strength Connection podcast, a show to share stories, insights, and experiences in strength, physically, mentally, and spiritually. I'm Michael Kurkowski, host of the Strength Connection, and I'm so grateful that you can join me today. So in these episodes, I connect with some of the most inspiring and successful individuals to chop it up and learn from true life experiences that have helped them become who they are, the strongest versions of themselves. One of the greatest ways I've always learned the most important lessons is through stories. We all have them, and they make us who we are. So let's dive in. Here we go. All right, everybody. Welcome to the Strength Connection podcast. Thanks for joining us. Jack Thomas, thanks so much for having me, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on here. I'm looking forward to this little conversation we're going to have today.
Absolutely. It's been a long time coming. I was pumped to hear, from Meg when she introduced us and we had a good chat, and, the work that you've done from Olympic athletes to coaching to now in the business world. I love hearing people's stories about their transition of it. So yeah, man, I'm really looking forward to it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. I gotta ask, this is like the stupid question first, but like I asked this to Meg too, but there's so many sports out there that you can go into. How did you get into a sport of skeleton where you're essentially shooting down on this small little path, 90 miles per hour down an ice chute? How did that all come about for you?
That's right. It's to be honest, I never thought I'd ever do this sport ever. My background was always like football or soccer. When I first started sport, and then I moved into like the track and field world. So I was always a pretty fast sprinter over a really short distance, and I'd be out of the blocks and get to 60 meters, and everyone would just shoot past me to the last 40 meters and the 100. So I'm like, right, okay. I always had that goal of competing in the Olympic Games, competing for my country, and I was never quite at that level for track and field. And in 2011, I just come back from a summer in the States. Actually, I went and worked on a summer camp for in Pennsylvania. It was. I came back and I had my plumbing career in the past, and one of my friends was just posting on Facebook. It's like, I've just trialed out for this power to podium, it was called. And so I messaged him. I was like, what's this? He goes, oh, it's hopefully going to get me into the Olympic Games. I was like, right, I need to know about this then. So I had a look about it, and the deadline was I think the deadline was the end of August. I'd found this the beginning of, no, end of September it was. And I was like, you know what, I'm just going to shoot my shot and send an application in and just see what comes from it. And then I get a phone call a couple of days later. Like, Jack, we need you to come down to Leeds, which was it's around an hour and a half from where I was living at the time in England. So I went down, and there was this huge testing protocol for all sorts of different sports. There was rugby sevens, weightlifting, cycling, rowing, skeleton, bobsled, all sorts of other things. I'm like, right, I wore my bright colors. Like, I'm going to get noticed this day, and just take it from there. And, gave everything on this day. And I thought nothing of it. I was like, you know what, I've given my all. We'll see what comes from it. And then I got an email from British Skeleton, who invited me down to their high performance like training center down in Bath, which was right to the south of the country in England.
Sure.
So I'm like, right, yeah, this is it. I'm gonna go for this. And it's almost like the X Factor process, where you go through different stages and you live auditions, and then go to the judges' houses and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Over a 6-month period, and then that was it. Skeleton became a career, man.
Did you go to that specifically for skeleton, or was it more kind of like you go in there and kind of you do a bunch of different things, and then they see what you would work on maybe best of going into the different teams?
Exactly. Yeah, I went solely to just trial out for all sorts of different sports. I didn't care what sport I was going to do. I just wanted to compete for my country. Yeah. And then it was skeleton that brought me on, and I grabbed that opportunity with both hands and ran with it.
Yeah. So before going to those trials, did you ever do skeleton before?
Never. I think I'd seen it once on TV in like 2010. So I saw Amy Williams, an athlete who competed for Great Britain. She just won an Olympic gold medal in 2010. So I think it was the first Winter Olympics gold medal Britain had in a long, long time. So she was plastered all over the media. Yeah. Looks pretty cool, that sport. I'd give that a go. Never thought I'd actually do it.
Yeah. What did they see in you of going into skeleton? Is there specific things that you look for? Because it's hard as somebody who doesn't really know the sport to know what are the skill sets that
like you need to acquire to do something like that? Obviously, you need to have probably fast twitch and,
Yeah.
be quick out of the blocks of getting in there. But what are the other things that maybe the feedback that you got that said, yeah, we want you to be a part of this team?
Well, you know what? We didn't actually get any feedback from the test, which
Really?
was crazy. No, a lot of skeleton athletes come from either track and field or rugby in the UK
Mhm.
anyway. And you've obviously got to be a really fast accelerator, have pretty solid power. So there were like a lot of sprint tests that we did on the day, jump tests, and then there were a couple of like endurance tests as well. So I think they were looking at those endurance tests as like resilience to see if you could actually push yourself if you were a power athlete, see if you could push yourself through those endurance events. And because it's skeleton is a lot about the mind and
Mhm.
um yeah, so they were the main test. I think they obviously did anthropometric tests too. um but yeah, I didn't get any feedback, but from what I know now, I think that's what they were looking at.
That seems both terrifying and exciting at the same time of being like, okay, I'm jumping into this sport. I don't really know why they like completely want me on this, but hey, it's a chance to go to the Olympics. But probably
Exactly.
going into that, I mean, not knowing much about the sport, what was that learning curve like of getting into skeleton? Was it a pretty easy transition, or was there a lot of challenges of really learning the ins and outs of the sport?
Yeah, to be honest, at first I really took to pushing the sled quite well. It's a very awkward position. Obviously, you're bent over, sprinting at maximum velocity with your hand about 20 centimeters off the ground. So it's a bit of an odd position to be running maximally. Um, so during the first period, it was all very much like athletically. So you were being tested in the gym, you were sprinting, you were pushing the sled just to see if you could take to it. And luckily I did. But during that time, my first trial, when I went down to Bath, I actually tore my hamstring the day of the trial. And I was like, oh, you've got to be kidding me. Like,
Oh
this
my
is the one
gosh.
opportunity I'm getting, and the hamstring's just gone. Um, but I remember vividly. So we had to achieve, I think it was 5.9 seconds. Anyone who got below that time on the push track on the first day, you got to pick what you wanted for lunch. So I was like, I'm getting me a good sandwich here.
Yeah.
And we did it. There was a few of us who did it at the time.
Mhm.
But I thought my chances were over at that one point, to be totally honest with you.
Oh yeah. What was, I mean,
Tore my
how,
hamstring, that's it, it's done.
yeah, how did that, I mean, so did you compete with the torn hamstring then? You still went into it?
Yes, so I actually did it on the day pretty much. I had a little niggle in training at track and field doing sled pulls the week prior, and then yeah, on the day it went. But I'd done it. I didn't think at the time I'd done enough, but I clearly did do enough to get through to the next stage.
Mhm.
So that was just a weekend camp that we did there.
Yeah.
And then a couple of weeks later, it was like a pretty intensive camp with the torn hamstring. I'm like, you kidding
Whew,
me?
man. Yeah. So now you get in. I'd love to ask you kind of about the training protocol and the program that you did of doing this. Obviously, you said there's a big mental side to it. I'm sure there's a physical side of it. What's the program like of like developing and getting ready for peaking at something like the Olympic Games? What was kind of like the day-to-day work that you were doing?
Yeah, I'll give you a bit of an insight into like what it was like getting into the sport itself, and then like progress through to that. So obviously coming into skeleton, you have no idea what the sport is. These corners are as high as a building. You're sustaining like 5 Gs of force with your head. My head was on the ice. My head was like dragging on the ice under the G force. So you go into these new tracks. In Britain, we had a great system. The coaching was unbelievable. The way it was set up there. So we had 18 months of traveling the world, getting on these tracks for the first time, and really building up our foundational knowledge of the sport. And then after that period, we would come on to compete. So the goal was to be the fastest pushers in the world.
Mhm.
And we went through a really intense training period of 18 months pretty much to get
Mhm.
ourselves into that position where we could actually perform to the highest standard. The training always worked um, in the summer. It was summer training was usually from the first week of May
Mhm.
through to the first week of October. Um, and it was 2 or 3 sessions a day. We'd get into training, and we always had this session called Prepare to Perform, which was between like 7:30 and 8:30, where you get in, you do all of your tests, like your knee to wall and your Thomas test and hamstring tests. And then we'd move into a lot of like prehab type work movement, like a screening and then prehab movement. And then we'd move into our first proper session, which would either be a heavy sprint session or prowler push or sled drag or pushing on the push track. And then we'd have a break halfway through the day, and then we'd go into a heavy gym session, couple of hour gym session in the afternoon. So that session was done Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then the Tuesday, Thursday was more of like we'd always do the prepare to perform every day, but then this Tuesday and Thursday was always a bit more of a recovery day, and we put a bit of conditioning in there as well, and core work and things like that. But that's pretty much how it looked for the best part of the decade for me.
Yeah, with the prepare, so they were doing a lot of assessment on you, almost like on a day-by-day basis on that, like just kind of just making sure that it was a green light to go with stuff on a day-by-day.
Yeah, exactly. We had to do all sorts of other stuff, like how was our sleep, how was our hydration, muscle soreness. Like these were all things that we had to fill out as athletes, and just to give like the support team enough information to know where you were at that day, know where you were at the week before, and it always built really good information for my team to see where I was at.
Yeah. And you talked about like resilience, which I love that word, and I want to speak about that a little bit further down too. But with that, yeah, the physical training side, which was obviously very thorough, on a day by day. But then you said a lot of it is the mental side. Was there specific practices that you did like during the training of working on your mindset, or was that more kind of like when you were in the skill work and, just kind of working there? What was that process like?
Yeah, we were lucky to have some unbelievable sports psychologists in the UK. So we actually did a lot of like breathing work to get ourselves prepared. Obviously the physical training is physical training. We like to do a lot of visualization in the summer, where that will prepare us for the winter. Because at the end of the day, we're not sprinters. We're not being judged on sprinting as fast as possible. Yes, the time of the start matters, but at the end of the day, it's what you get at the bottom of the track is the main thing. That's what wins or loses races. So we did a lot of visualization and figuring out ways that we could actually visualize in a better way, bringing our mindset into a place that you could actually perform. So that a lot of the work was done in the summer for the winter, really.
Yeah. What was with the visualization? I was going to ask about like the process of visualization, for you, because I'm assuming like going down 90 miles an hour, like you have to be in the right headspace in there to perform at something like that, because that is, your reaction time is going to definitely change when you're going at that type of Mach going there. What was the visualization like for you, Jack? Was it kind of visualizing the track, like going through it? Was it more like affirmation type work? Can you break down that process a little bit more for me?
Yeah, I would always, prior to going, I'd always try and get myself in a good state of mind before I actually visualize the track. So I'd be telling myself how great I felt. I'm like, when I'm coming out of the block, I'm going to be long and strong. Positive affirmations, really. I used a lot of positive affirmations before I really knew what positive affirmations were. It was just me telling myself how great I was going to be, how great I feel. Because like the stories you tell yourself are exactly what's going to come out. Yeah. So I was always telling myself how great I was, even if I woke up and I had a snotty nose and didn't feel particularly well. I'm like, you know what, this is good, because I know I'm going to be able to sink into my sled. I know I'm going to be able to flow through the corners. I'm not going to steer too much in higher pressure corners. It was just always telling myself the best was going to come from that. And with skeleton, you can be stood at the top of the track. I'll use Whistler, for example. The first time I was in Whistler, I was absolutely shitting myself. It's it's a track that's the highest G-force, it's the highest speed in the world, and it's a track where an athlete has lost their life most recently, back in 2010 at the Olympics, illusion around the sport. it brings all of those fears to the forefront of your mind. So for me to be actually tell myself, you know, you're going to be fine. You've got great fundamental skills. You know exactly what to do in this situation. You know how to feel G-force. You know what oscillations feel like. So I kept telling myself over and over again that that was what was happening.
Yeah.
And you know, I did survive. I got down there safely.
Right.
Thankfully, got a concussion, but that's another story.
Yeah. Meg taught me so much about affirmations when she was on the podcast. I don't know how much you got. I'm sure you guys have spoken about it, quite a bit, but I had a trouble with affirmations of like understanding it because I was like, where is the power behind it? Because I always thought it was like so general, like, oh, I'm the best, I'm great, and stuff like that. But if you don't feel great or you're not the best, like it's kind of just saying words. Where
Yeah,
when she came on, she was saying you have to make it personal, like something that you know is true. Like I'm gonna be fast because I've been fast before, and actually bringing an idea of when you were fast before. So actually connecting it with something that you've done before that showed what you're saying is actually a true statement and bring it down.
exactly.
And since we had that, like I've worked with that a lot myself and work with clients on that of like actually making affirmations a personal thing. It's not just shouting out like I'm the greatest motherfucker here. It's like, no,
Yeah,
it's like, no, like I am, I'm going to do great here. Like the best is yet to come. I like how you phrased it there, and I picked up on that. So yeah, affirmation, it's an interesting thing because I don't think a lot of people still, use it as much in their practice. But when you make it more personal, then I think it could be a really powerful tool.
definitely, definitely. It's funny, like you just said, actually, the best is yet to come because that's what I would say after every single race. Because
Mhm.
I always, even if I wasn't performing, I was like, I say I finished 15th, 16th. I was like, the best is yet to come because I knew the level that I could get to. I said it every single time. The best is yet to come.
That's
Did
beautiful.
I lose you then? I think my internet might be pretty bad here.
No, I love it. Yeah. No, my friend Carrie Campbell has a great journaling line where she says when you're writing things out, at the end you put dot 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 or even something better.
Oh, I
Like
like
so
that.
yeah, so it's like I want to do this or this is what I'm trying to achieve, dot dot dot, or even something better. I'm like, it's a beautiful reframe, of it. And really it does. It goes into the mindset side and the practical side of actually putting something that's ethereal into something that's actually a practice
Yeah,
that you can
definitely.
dive into. Yeah. So all
It's
right.
if
So
you can feel it as well. Like one of the biggest things of like affirmations, if you can say anything like you just said, I'm the baddest motherfucker in the world.
yeah.
If you can't feel that, then it's never going to happen.
Yeah. That's a tough thing because I think that's where I've had a lot of conversations on this podcast with people who are in the mindset, field, and I kind of can't stand that word in many ways because nobody knows what the hell it means.
Yeah.
And I think what you just said there, Mark England had a great thing. It's like it's the story you tell yourself, which I think is a really good definition. But when you're actually going into the practices, you have to create some sort of internal emotion. You have to get a feedback in it behind.
Definitely.
That's why I think it's so powerful of connecting an athletic pursuit or a physical pursuit with the mental, because if you just keep it in the mind, but then you don't have it translate into something physical,
Mm,
like it still just stays within the mind with all the other bullshit that we have. Like if you
exactly.
actually bring it into a physical realm where you're actually feeling it, you're actually creating that sensation in your body.
Yeah.
Okay, now all of a sudden, now we're into a practice in here. And I think it's probably why there's so many athletes that we listen to when we hear their stories about it, because we can all resonate with that because you're not just talking about it of just this stuff in your mind. It's
Yeah.
actually applying it into something that now you're bringing it into the physical realm.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. So, all right. So you said so when before you started coaching in for the US and the China team, you're already coaching in track and field. So this was kind of like this was the path that you thought you were going to do even before you really got into, being an athlete.
Exactly. Yes. Because that's the route I thought I was going to take. So I did all my coaching badges in track and field up until I was 19. So I was the youngest coach at the club, where I was training, but then also coaching in a coaching capacity as well for some private athletes. Um, so yeah, I always thought that was the route I was going to take. My dad was a track and field coach. he coached two Paralympic athletes in 2012.
That's-
And I loved seeing like the impact, not only that he had on me, he was an inspiration to me, but also like all of the other kids and athletes that he worked with, how he built them up to with unbelievable foundations. It was just so rewarding for him. But then I could see that that's how he felt as well. So I always thought I was going to get into coaching, but when I retired from being an athlete for GB, I didn't really want to retire, to be totally honest with you. It was 2019. World Championships were in Whistler, and I had to get a top three. I had to medal at the Worlds to maintain my funding. So how it works in GB, luckily we have the lottery funding, so they give you a grant every month, which goes towards like your living costs and to be able to train and things like that. Well, yeah, I ended up getting a pretty bad concussion on this race and could not get one corner. It was like a corner 7. I remember it vividly. I just couldn't crack it. So yeah, I ended up losing all my funding, got removed from the program. And then that summer I was like, I'm going to train hard, come back in October, win selection races, and I'll get my funding back. Well, during that summer of 20 director, a guy called Andreas Schmidt, brilliant guy, did a hell of a lot for me as an athlete, and then even more so as a coach. She's like, Jack, I've got an opportunity for you, and I really need a coach to coach the ICC team, which is the second tier of sliding. I've got this opportunity. I want you to come on and do that for me. You'll have a whole team of support staff with you. What do you think? And I was like, and ahhing. I'm not done with being an athlete. I want to come back and see what I've got. But then the opportunity was just too good to turn down for my future. So I'm like, right, we're going for it. And genuinely, it was the best decision I ever made. Unbelievable time coaching for the Chinese team.
Did you feel it right away? Like when you got into coaching, you're like, oh yeah, this is what I want to do.
Like the rewarding side of it, absolutely. Yeah, it was far more rewarding coaching athletes than it was for myself personally. Like for me, winning a race, yeah, it's brilliant. And I loved that feeling of winning a race and hearing the national anthem and seeing the flag go up.
Yeah.
But doing it for another person was so much more rewarding.
Yeah.
So much more rewarding.
It is. It's weird that it is like that, right? Like, it's fun to get accolades for yourself, but when you see somebody that is under your wing or that you helped get there and you see them, it's like, I mean, it's like this human nature. We want to help other people, in their craft.
We do.
So,
it's beautiful. Just taking like the small little things that you might say to them and then seeing the athlete actually put that into practice.
Yeah.
It's like, shit, this is sick.
It is. It's a hard feel. I'm feeling it right now. If like I remember these times, during my whole coaching career, of like those times when you feel it. So it is. There's really something to it. So with the Chinese, I wanted to ask really about the difference because you worked with both the U.S. team and you worked with the Chinese team from there. Was it very different as far as like the culture and kind of the work of working with both teams there? Like, is it like the process that they go into? Is it different? Like, because I mean, obviously it's two very different cultures that you're working with.
Definitely. It was completely different. Polar opposites, genuinely. Learned a lot from both and I enjoyed working in both teams. With China, they brought in a lot of because they had no idea what the sport was, so they brought in a lot of foreigners to come in and build the whole team. There was no skeleton team back in, let's say, 2015, something like that. So they brought in all of the foreigners to build the team. So it was very much it was brilliant because we could just say what was needed and it would just happen and everyone would follow what was said. And it was a brilliant team to work with actually. So my contract was actually until 2020 after the Olympics 2022 for China. But I had to come back in 2020, end of 2020. So I was still working for the Chinese, but then I didn't actually go back for the games. But during that period, that's when the US team contacted me to work with them. And to be totally honest with you, a dream of mine was coaching Team USA at the Olympics.
Really?
Yeah, genuinely. Even from when I was younger, I was like, one of the biggest nations in the world, biggest
Mhm.
sporting nation in the world. I'm like, how incredible would it be to coach the national team?
Really? Did you
Yeah,
ever have an aspect to want to go to GB, or was it always US? That was
no,
like,
I didn't want to coach the British team.
really?
Never wanted to coach the British team. It wasn't on my radar at all. It was always the US for whatever
Really?
reason. I don't really know why. It was just something that I had a call into. That was what I wanted to do. But yeah, like the way both teams, going back to that question, operated was completely different. Um, the Chinese team were all very much centralized. They worked together as one, from the top down, whereas all of the and it was funded, so they were allowed to do that. Whereas in the US, a lot of the athletes weren't actually funded. They all had their own strength coaches, they all had their own mental performance coaches, their own
Oh, okay.
nutritionists. So it was a bit scattered, to be honest. And that came from the top. That came from the CEO down, and like the culture that was created there. And unfortunately, it wasn't the greatest culture within the team. If I would have stayed there for a bit longer, I would have liked to have had an impact on changing that culture and
Sure.
bringing more of a togetherness and a collaborative approach throughout. Because yeah, there really wasn't that. It was very much every man for themselves or every woman for themselves. And
Yeah. Was that a shock to you when you got there after working with like the Chinese team, which was so like kind of, I mean, if you've heard that a lot, I mean, especially because, US, we're a melting pot of culture, of different
yeah,
people. So it is much more individualized, where
definitely.
Chinese is much more homogenous. It's kind of like follow the tier, kind of know the tier hierarchy, but everybody's kind of working, in congruency. Was
Yeah,
that like a big shock to you when you came over and be like, wow, everybody's going their own way?
huge. Yeah, I thought it was going to be more like the British system with a bit more structure and like really good leadership and a togetherness. So it did. It really shocked me. It really shocked me.
Yeah. Was it a fun challenge for you though? Kind of like doing like something different like that?
Absolutely. I don't think I was there long enough to actually have the
Yeah.
bigger impact that I would have liked to have had, because my contract was only from it was I basically came in for the Olympic season, so I was never going to come in and try and change a culture in that period. I was there to help athletes get from World Cup and into the Olympic Games and compete at the Olympic Games at the highest standard.
Mhm.
That was my sole focus. I wasn't coming in to try and ruffle the feathers at all. But yeah, potentially, if I would have continued, I would have. Don't know if it would have worked, but I certainly would
Yeah.
have voiced my opinions definitely.
Yeah, us beautiful Americans, we got to always find our own way, get our own coaches in there. So no, it is. I mean, it's
You
I
know
mean, you
what?
get
A big strength as well.
oh, it's a huge strength. It is. It's like, I mean, because everybody is, pushing for the best, in there, and you can
Definitely.
really kind of set yourself out. I mean, it's, kind of part of our culture, which yeah, I would assume that, like, yeah, it's going to be a big kind of culture shock, especially as a coach of coming in there. So, yeah, that was kind of an answer. I was a very, like, I was pretty sure I was going to have the right key point
Yeah.
on there. Yeah. So now, I mean, I mean, that was your world for a long time of the athletics and then coaching and athletes. And now, which with Own Your Space, you're now more like in the corporate world on mindset, on resiliency. I know you spoke at Facebook London recently about resiliency in there. What is like, was that a big transition of like working more with people who weren't in the athletic realm, who are now kind of in the business zone? How was that transition for you?
Yeah, it was huge. Going from I never wanted to work in an office at all, and
Mhm.
going from being in that athletic world, traveling the world, and everyone having like clear goals of what it is that they were trying to achieve, athletes and coaches and support staff, and coming into a corporate world where that really wasn't there. That was one of the biggest shocks for me, because it was everyone's always pushing for the next step in sport, like what can we do to achieve X, Y, and Z. Whereas in like the corporate world, it felt very slow and like almost like some people were just floating along.
Mhm.
And for me, that was the biggest shock, where people were just floating, just going from day to day. And
Mhm.
it was like blowing my mind, like this was even a thought process.
Yeah.
Um, that was the biggest shock, moving
Yeah.
from sport into corporate world. Yeah.
Yeah. Why do you think that is? I always question that about it. It's like, is it just you kind of get comfortable and like in a certain zone? It like it seems that in athletics, there's always a pursuit, like there's a goal, right? There's like a
Yeah.
deadline or so. Like, you've got the Olympics, like it's coming up, or you've got the World Cup, or you got the Super Bowl, like
Mhm.
something that you're striving toward with a specific deadline. Where in businesses, it's a very long game going on. And it's like
It is.
sometimes it can be very challenging to, because you don't know, there's no real end goal to it. Like the goal is to keep playing the game. It's an infinite game versus kind of a finite game. I
Mhm.
wonder if that's one of like the big things, because not everybody has that entrepreneurial spirit in there. Maybe some people just, it's kind of like you just get so into the humdrum of just the everyday process, and it can just get so monotonous that there's not
Yeah.
that fire in your gut to go out and like aim for the next level. I don't know.
Yeah, you know what? Even as an athlete or a coach, you've always got that monotonous thing that you've got to do. It's no different in sport, and then obviously in business. There's always going to be monotony and tedious tasks that you have to do. I think one thing that we do well in sport is actually identifying goals. I don't think certainly in some businesses they don't have goals. They don't have like a vision that they've got together. Like say for example, you're going into a business and they're selling cars, for example, um, would every single person in that business, it might just be a small dealership, but would say there were 20 staff, would every single person in that business know what the goal of the business was? They're more than likely not going to. So if they don't know the vision and the direction of the business, then how are they actually going to implement the things that they need to do on a day-to-day basis
Mhm.
to get to that level?
Yeah.
Whereas
Y-
that for me is one of the biggest differences in sport and business, like the
Yeah.
wholeness of the collective
Mhm.
focus and vision.
Yeah, yeah, if you probably go into most businesses right now and you ask like what's the company mission statement or what's the common goal, it's like, they look at you with five heads. They'll throw something out there because they don't want to they're
Exactly.
afraid of the silent on there.
Yeah.
But it is. So when you go into like these business and you kind of work in them, like, is that one of the common things that you see, with people? Is it more lack of vision? Like what are kind of the struggles that you see from more like the team on the
Um,
business?
well, obviously, yes, some of them that I've seen from the outside and spoken to people in these businesses. It is very much that there is an overarching focus for the business, but then when you break it down, each team may not have their goal set out because it's great having an overarching focus for a business, but then if each team doesn't have their own set of targets and goals, then how are you ever going to achieve that? And it's quite simple when you think of it. It's not rocket science. It's just we want to get to this level. So what do we need to do to be able to get to that level? And then it's
Mhm.
just working it backwards, basically.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say. Yeah, it's just no
Yeah.
direction. Yeah,
I know it's simple. It's like, but it's not easy. It's always like when these things are so simple, like why is it still such a struggle,
yeah.
for it of going in? And I think like one of those terms that we, talked about, which I says is having resilience on there. We spoke about it a few different times. And I want to just ask you, like, I always love the definition of words because like you can have like the Webster's dictionary, but everybody kind of has a personal story to it. Like when you think of what resilience is, what is your like definition of
Oh,
like that specific word?
good question. Oh, I was gonna. The definition. I was gonna say something like not having a big enough why, but that isn't really. That is part of it. Um, Tough one.
Mhm.
I can say what I think resilience is like for a
Sure.
resilient person, for example. It's like I would say just accepting that shit actually happens. There's a lot of the time people think, why me? But then why not me? And that gives the opportunity for growth if you can identify and look at it in that way.
Mm.
And always a reason behind something, always.
I think I like that, just knowing that shit's gonna happen.
Yeah, it is. It's inevitable. We're all human beings at the end of the day, and it's not a consecutive upward trajectory through life, isn't it? And there's certain things that have been thrown to absolutely everybody, whether it be ending a relationship, losing a family member, not winning a race. There's
Mhm.
all sorts of things that happen through life, and you're gonna get these troughs. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I've had this thought for a while, Jack, is like the difference between setting standards and then setting expectations. And I think it's kind of on the same realm of what we're talking about being resilient, because I think oftentimes like it can be in sport or it can be in business, just life. is we set expectations. This is what we want to like achieve. This is the desired goal that we have. But
Mhm.
expectations are external. Like it's something that you actually can't control what happens.
Mm.
But if you shift it over and say, well, what are the standards that I'm holding myself to? That's an internal thing. Those are actually things that you can control. And like,
Definitely.
because, when you say shit's going to happen, right? All those external things that life is going to throw at you, the defense, I use the term scout the defense with my clients of like, life plays a professional defense at you. Like it knows your offensive playbook as much as you know it.
I like
And
that.
it's going to throw stuff at you as much as possible. And there are things that you can't control. Like you can't control the blitz that is coming from this side. You just have to,
Mhm.
if you see it a little bit ahead of time, then maybe you could be more proactive. But the way to do that is to set your standards of what you
Mhm.
have. And I think that's where a lot of people we struggle is we have a goal and we're always looking, well, this is where I expect to be, or these are the expectations that I want to get. But that's kind of like chasing the ceiling, right? Like
Yes.
you're never
Yeah,
going to get the ceiling, but with standards, it's more about elevating your floor, like have less shitty days where
definitely.
even if shit hits the fan, you can still look back and be like, well, if I hold to my standards, you're still progressing and moving forward. And I'm always curious. I'm like, I wonder if this is one of the better analogies that we can use for people
Mm.
of going into the day by day thing. So when shit happens, you can still deal with it and you can be resilient.
Yeah, it's like just going back off from what you said, it's like controlling the controllables, that's all you can do. If it's out of your control, then what's the point in even focusing on that?
Mhm.
It's like, shifting the focus to the actual good. So embracing the good, being intentional and deliberate, searching for the good. And like these are the controllables that you can control.
Mhm.
And if we have our focus on them, then that's going to set us up so well to be able to be resilient.
Yeah. Did you guys do that a lot with coaching? Like, did you do like reflection of like victories afterwards? Like, did you do a lot of any practices like journaling before and afterwards? Was that a part of your process?
Yeah, we we did. It was more so of actually reviewing the runs. So you'd always journal after the run of what went on. So I always asked myself as an athlete, and then asked my athletes when I coached as well. I used the three whats. So what did I want to happen? What actually happened? And what am I going to continue, or what do I now need to change? So this was my review process every single day, and it's super easy questions to answer, and if you answer them honestly, then that's where you can then keep growing and keep moving forward.
Mhm.
And that can be anything. That's not just sport. That can be actually business. It could be a meeting. It could be the podcast we're having now.
Yeah.
It could be anything. Like those three questions, I will use for the rest of my life.
Yeah, I love that. It kind of makes it a little bit of a game in there
Yeah.
too. Yeah, I think one of the strong things about that is it takes the self-analysis into something objective without self-judgment. It's like how
Mhm.
easy it is that we can look at the things, oh, I fucked up on this, or I messed up on that. It's like, and we go into that self-criticism, we go into that self-judgment, and then you start going down that spiral where if
Mm.
you can actually like look at something objectively. That's why it's people have asked me a lot because I've spoken about journaling, quite a bit. And it's like, well, why did you like I think journaling's a tool, just like anything. I think the best part about it is it's actually like a physical thing that you can have
Mm.
to get it like objectively out where I can write that down. So I love what you said there about like the three whats of like now actually taking it out of your mind where you can clog that up with a bunch of different things that's going on and actually just put it into, oh, okay, objectively, what was my objective here? What did actually happen? How can I learn from this? How can I grow from this? What's the next step? So I think that's one of the things it seems like with mindset practice is just taking it out of the like the subjective and actually just making an objective reality. Like look at it of just like, okay, what actually really happened here? Like and
Yeah.
take the fear out of it.
Yeah. There's no attachment to it then, if you're looking at it objectively.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. So, right. So now with the work, tell me a little bit more about Own Your Space. Like, what's kind of the day-to-day work that you do now of working with business? Like, what are the things that you're going over with people now in the corporate world to kind of help expand, in their own fields?
So Own Your Space is a big marketing agency. So we're based in the UK, we're expanding into the US this year. And we do all sorts of different things like, ranking on Google and running all your paid advertisements and email campaigns. I came into the business being like the in-between from the clients into the teams themselves. So with our content team, development team, paid team, that's where I came in to sit into the business. Now I do more of the sales side of things, which is, I love selling. I love being able to speak to people and help, because that's, at the end of the day, we've got a service that can help other businesses perform. And having all of that artillery an extension of your business, that's pretty much what we do. Yeah.
What's the main concerns? What's the main things that people are like coming to you asking about? Like we talked a few of them,
Go ahead.
in this, in the podcast here, but what are like the main things that people seem like they're struggling with the most, like when, putting together their team or trying to build their business?
To be honest, that side of things is the market. That we were always an extension of their marketing team. Most businesses may not have one. If they do, then we'll just be an added extra for them. So it's always like everything we can provide is like content, website development, all that sort of stuff. And yeah, that's what they're coming to us for. They're coming to us for all of those services. So it's not actually going into the business and changing how they look and how they function. It's building out their whole marketing side of things and making it more efficient from on your space.
Nice. Awesome, man. So, well, Jack, dude, it's been a blast diving in and chatting with you on here. I love hearing the story of, I still think it's absolutely freaking crazy that you go down on an ice shoot, with your head on the ice at 90 miles an hour. But we need crazy people like here to have these stories of life and to share the moments of resilience. So, brother, I really appreciate you and diving in. If people want to check out more of like what you do, like the work that you do, what's the best place that they can go and follow you?
Check out Instagram. I'm not super active on there, but I will be in this year, building that out a little bit more. So it's T-Tray Thomas. So TeaTrayThomas. I actually got that nickname from a journalist back in the day. So the T-Tray is basically the sled that we used to slide on. So they said T-Tray Thomas, and it stuck from there.
Oh, I love it. It flows perfectly. Yeah. That's great. So awesome. Jack, brother, dude, thank you so much. Super grateful for you. Listeners, go check out Jack. Thank you so much for listening. I'll catch you guys on the next one. All right, peace.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you found some great value here. And if you like this episode, please drop a comment and leave us a 5-star rating and review. It does more to build the show than you can imagine. And do not forget to check out and join the Strength Connection Facebook group. In this group, I share the biggest takeaways and lessons from these amazing conversations, as well as training and strength tips for pursuing mastery and fulfillment in life. This group is filled with individuals looking to take full control over their strength, and it's the perfect space to explore new ideas and to share your journey. And you'll also get exclusive access to these Strength Connection Mastery seminars. It's a deep dive into the physical, mental, and spiritual training that you can begin using immediately. So do not wait. Go now. Seriously, go. All right, much love to you. Thank you so much, and I'll catch you on the next one.